And Jeff, Jim, Danielle,
Hey,
how you
Alicia.
doing?
Hey, how's it
Hi.
going,
I
Alicia?
came back for a second.
Good, nice to see you all.
You too.
Mhm.
Is that wallpaper, by the way, in your
Yes.
background? Yes.
I put it up especially for today because it was a white wall, so I thought let's jazz it up a little, and I put it up. I did a pretty good job, I think.
Yeah, you did.
How much
Jacqueline,
do you,
can you
how much
hear
do you
us? Is
charge,
that
Alicia?
good?
How much do you charge? How much do you come and wallpaper in my office?
Yeah.
Okay,
Very
so I think we have everybody. Would everybody like to raise their hand who has a question? Jacqueline can hear us now. We've got Alicia and Eddie from TCM. We have Jacqueline Bisset. And so would anyone like to raise their hand and do the first question?
I guess I'll go. I'm G. Allen Johnson. I'm with the San Francisco Chronicle. It's great to meet you, Jacqueline. And being from the San Francisco Chronicle, my obvious question, since you're here for Bullitt,
Yes.
is can you give me your impressions of, your memories of working in San Francisco while making that film?
Well, it was actually quite a journey for me because I lived in Los Angeles and the director, Peter Yates, said he wanted me to go to San Francisco and get sort of in the groove of San Francisco. I really had no idea what that meant. I was very inexperienced still. And so we took an apartment and it was a nice apartment and I thought everybody was frightfully fashionable and it was all very smart and I really had no idea then what to do with myself because I was waiting to shoot and I waited for like, I don't know, 8 or 9 weeks. And I would come back to LA and say, I think they're cutting me out of the film because I mean, all I do when I go out there, we go out for lunch, I join I go on the set, say hello to everybody. Everybody's very nice and I go back and I live in my apartment. And then I rented a car to try and get into the groove of that thing on the hills and I had a terrible sense of that I was going to go backwards down the hill. Every time I reached the top of a hill, I didn't know how to, I didn't have an automatic, I had a stick shift, and it was a few moments when I thought, And then eventually, Peter said, you're on. And then I had to pull it together and behave like a serious person. But I thought San Francisco was beautiful. I was a little intimidated by the experience. I was, fairly new in the film business, and I hadn't done much in Hollywood, and I was more of an English type person. And by that I mean I was a little bit shy. And what was really awesome was the driving scenes and I hadn't seen this before. Nobody had seen this sort of leaping off hillsides at high speed, and it was awesome. And the people who did it were awesome. And we ate out in restaurants a lot, which was great. There's some wonderful restaurants, and we would go usually like 4 or 5 of us with Steve McQueen and the director and producer, and we would all usually sit in rooms that were very private because Steve didn't seem to want to be out there in the crowd. And he was very like an animal, like a wild animal, coming in on his bike and then leaving on his bike, and the sense that he was almost like an alley cat, which was great, but like, where's Steve, where's Steve, where's Steve? And he would be with his back to the door. If he was in a restaurant, it would be in like these private rooms and stuff, mostly. You had the feeling that he didn't really love all that so much. Can you hear me? I can see your mouth moving, but nothing is coming out. I can't hear you.
Yes, well, they asked me to mute myself, so I did.
Oh, I see.
But it's a great story. By the way, as a follow-up, since you asked, what did you think of the film once you saw it at the premiere or wherever you first saw it?
I really liked it, but the reality is I never understood the plot. I never understood the plot. And I still don't understand the plot. Because if you miss what happens in the very, very beginning, there's a bit of stuff, and I didn't pay that much attention because I'm always looking for the main thing. And to this day, I don't think I could really tell you the plot.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, in a certain deep sense. I really couldn't. I just knew I was the female. I was the female, the softer side of his life, and I tried not to whine too much, as women do.
And so we've got Jeffrey Howard from Vegas Film Critic.
Yes, hello, Jacqueline. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, hello.
You were just starting out your career with this film, and it was such a tremendous hit. How did your life immediately change after the success of the film?
It didn't immediately change. It had changed just before that when I did a film with Frank Sinatra. That had been the change. That changed from radical change after that, because I was replacing Mia Farrow in the film with Sinatra. And there was tremendous speculation about their marriage and everything. And then suddenly I was the hot chick who got the plum part. The whole thing happened in a kind of fog. But when I did Bullitt, it was very shortly. I think it was the film that followed The Detective. And it was a completely different atmosphere. And I was cast and I tested for it. And it was all more sort of sedate in terms of the elements that led up to it, more classical.
Okay. I've got Danielle from Solzy at the Movies.
Hi, thank you for being here today. My
Hi.
question is, what was it like getting to work with Steve McQueen on Bullitt?
It was good. We worked well together. He was very kind, very patient. He was a bit hyper during the shoot because it was his first co-production. He would sort of rush up to me and speak in sort of hip American lingo that I didn't really understand, talk about soul chicks and dudes, and I was a bit off on that, didn't really know. But we're starting with the screen test with him. He was very, very patient, and I felt that he listened and was supportive. It was a good experience. And Peter Yates, the director, was also very supportive.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to let Real Talker, Jim Alexander, ask his question now.
Hi, Jacqueline. First of all, I'm just
Hi.
blown away how timeless and stunning you are after all these years. It's as if you haven't missed a beat.
Thank you.
I'm guessing everyone can agree here watching it too. My question is, are you surprised how this movie sort of Bullitt stood the test of time also, that we're still talking about it today after all these decades, that it's still relevant? What surprises you the most about that it's still so revered in this aspect?
Well, I think it's the degree about the car. The car has seemed taken on an enormous place in the history of cars, it seems. I get asked to go to car things, and the car, I mean, it's something that I'm not really, don't really relate to terribly, cars. I mean, fast cars, yes, I like the idea, but I mean, it's become almost godlike, that car. What was it called?
Well, it's a
It's dark
Mustang,
green.
but
The Mustang, yes,
yeah.
yes, it's a Mustang, yeah. I'm a bit surprised, yes, I am a bit surprised, because I didn't realize that films, well, I mean, I used to see films and then they'd be gone, and I didn't know them, that if you were in them, possibly they could go on and on. Before I was an actor, I was very keen on seeing certain kinds of films, and they lived forever in my heart. But being in one is actually an extraordinary feeling. And then when people, a couple of years ago, there was a 50th anniversary for it, which I was supposed to come to, and then I had an accident in my home, and I never got to go to that particular event. I felt terrible about it, and realized that for all the people who were so intrigued by the car and Steve McQueen and everything, and to a degree me, I felt like I'd let them down. It was not a good feeling. And I realized how important it is for some people, the fans. I'm not really a fan myself. I had people I liked as a young girl. There were some guys I really thought were hot, and some very wonderful actresses, but I didn't do like masses of pictures of them on the wall and stuff. I just really didn't. We didn't have television, and I didn't go to the movies till I was about 15, 16. So I wasn't very educated in all that. And my parents probably were quite strict. So it's a side of me that really wasn't there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got Gig Pata from Latino Review. Next question.
Hi there. I'm going to go ahead and ask a general question for all three of you. Jacqueline could always step in too. What is your definition of a classic film, and what do you think about remaking classic films?
Go for it, Eddie.
Well, no, I was actually looking for you so that you could take the lead, Alicia. Go right ahead, please.
Well, I think we used to define classic in particular terms, as in, pre-1980 used to be a classic film to me. But I think these days it's more of a general term, and things that are classics are what Jacqueline was talking about with Bullitt, the movies that have stood the test of time, the movies that you can watch time and time again. I also have a hard time figuring out the plot of Bullitt, but I find that exciting every time I watch it. I'm like, okay, this time I'm going to figure out what is going on. And I still don't quite get it, but I enjoy watching it every time. It's like a fresh movie. So that to me is a classic film. I think it was Lauren Bacall, or it could just be a quote that was attributed to her that it said, it's not an old movie if you haven't seen it. And that's how I always feel about classic movies, is that they're classic for a reason. Remaking movies, I mean, obviously remakes have been happening since the beginning of cinema, and they can go really well and they can go really badly. You can have personal preference over the original versus the new remake. But one reason that I like remakes is that it often introduces people to the older versions of the story. Like with Star is Born, we've had 4 versions of that story now. And when the latest version was released a couple of years ago, it encouraged people to go back and watch the other 3. And so that's why I, encourage remakes for that reason, so people can watch the original. What about you, Eddie?
Well, I will defer to Jacqueline if she has something to add to this right now. But
I don't really have anything very interesting. I mean, I know that if one is in a movie, sometimes you hear that they're possibly going to remake it. Sometimes one has a feeling of dread, and a slight feeling of possessiveness towards the project. You don't want it to be, you don't want your part to be recast, it's not a big deal, but you think, meh. I mean, but then I actually believe that when the material is really good, and obviously plays get redone by different casts and theater does, and when you do something classic, like I did a version of Anna Karenina, and of course that performance belongs to the many, many actresses who've done it before, and it will continue to do it. And you have to try not to be possessive about it as an actor.
Well, my attitude about this is that I think that you cannot put a time frame on something being classic, that has almost nothing to do with it. Because I know a lot of people are obsessed because TCM is starting to show more recent films, and people say, well, that's not a classic film, as though it can't be a classic until it's 50 years old or something, which I just don't believe, because I think classic films manage to sort of culturally sort of hit the nail on the head. I think it was apparent that The Godfather, for example, was a classic film within a few years of it being made. It just had this feel that this was the culmination of every gangster movie ever made. And now they've got it. This is the film, right? And I think Chinatown is like that. Like, they've made a million detective stories, but Chinatown nailed it. And there are films that I think of, like in the last 10 years or so, that I just know are going to stand that test, and that we'll be calling them classics in very, very short order. As for remaking the classics, why don't they remake the movies that aren't quite good enough? That's what I would like to see. Like, that was a great idea that they didn't quite execute well enough. They should remake that film instead of remaking the one that was so good that the remake can only suffer in comparison. Like, I've heard about they were going to do a new version of the Maltese Falcon, and it's like, I don't want to be the guy cast as Bogart, because you are not going to be able to pull that off. So that's my take on that.
But there's a new generation also, so they might not have seen the first one.
Correct, and I do agree with what Alicia said about it. It is great that if it introduces people, and it's not just because I want to see them comparing the films, it's because I think of movies as history, and it's a great way for people to go back and understand the context in which a film was made. Like, why was the film made differently in, say, 1940 than it would be today? And it helps you understand how the has evolved and changed over time. So I think there is real value in remaking films because of that. Like, remaking is not replacing. And I think that's very important to understand.
Okay, great. So we have a question from Jeffrey.
Yes, this is for Alicia. Hi, Alicia. Good to talk to you.
Hi, nice to see you again.
I wanted to get your thoughts on premiering this film festival is News from Home, the avant-garde documentary. It showcases New York City in the early 70s, which I think is one of the greatest times in cinema to show New York City.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I was wondering your thoughts on this film.
Yeah, I love this movie. I think Chantal Akerman was so ahead of her time in the way that she looked at the world, trying different methods of telling a story, and here getting to hear her letters to her mother and getting to see New York at that time and the juxtaposition of her talking about her experiences and the footage that you see. I think it plays to so many emotions of us of what is home, and home seemed to be something that Chantal explored quite a bit in her work. I also love watching this documentary because of the fact that you see everyone walking down the street, not on cell phones. You see the grittier side of New York, a time in which I wasn't around to see it. And you see just all the various neighborhoods that have changed and haven't changed. And so one of the reasons why I love watching classic films is getting to have that peek into a particular time. But I think just the way that her voiceover matches with the footage, it's a mesmerizing experience. And again, that's another word I would use for her films like Gendarme, long movie that you just find yourself ensconced in and you can't help but just let it wash over you, and it elicits so many emotions. So I'm glad that we're showing it as part of our film festival, and hopefully more people see it.
Thank you.
That's great. I've got a question from Guy.
Hi. I have a question for the hosts. Before that, a quick comment about not understanding the plot of Bullitt. Jacqueline came over from Casino Royale a little bit before that. That's quite a couple of films there. Just for the host, one, Eddie, since you grew up in San Francisco, talk about the first time you saw Bullitt. And how it affected you. And then Alicia, great to meet you. Can you talk a little bit about Jacqueline as an actress?
Absolutely.
I don't know if Jacqueline, I don't know if we discussed this when we did our interview for the film, but my sister is actually in Bullitt. She's actually in the scene in the coffee cantata that, when you have dinner with Steve McQueen, she was an atmosphere player in that scene. So that was my first introduction to Bullitt, was waiting up for her to come home from shooting the film, because I believe it was the first thing that she ever did. She's also in Dirty Harry, and she's in Played Against Sam and a bunch of other movies that were shot in San Francisco. She was at one point the president of the San Francisco chapter of the Screen Actors Guild. So she was in a lot of films shot in San Francisco at that time. So that was my first exposure to Bullitt. And of course, I did try to recreate some of the driving scenes in my youth. I banged the bottom of Mom's car quite a few times on the hills in San Francisco, trying to emulate not just Steve McQueen, but to give them their due, Bill Hickman. Bill Hickman, yes. and Bud Eakins was the other driver who did some of Steve McQueen's more difficult maneuvers. Those two guys are amazing. And of course, Bill Hickman is also the stunt driver in the French Connection. So he was like the man.
Is he still alive? Do you know if he's still alive?
I'm not sure. I honestly don't know. But he also had a wonderful career as an actor because, you know, he had that heavy face and he wears, you know, in the scene, he wears those horn-rimmed glasses when he's driving, you know, and yeah, he's just terrific. But of course, being a native San Franciscan, I'm always the guy who points out none of this makes any sense because the route they're driving is logistically impossible.
So funny.
You know, they're in the marina, then they're in the Mission District, left turn, I'm now in Marin County. It's like,
That's so funny.
my God, they're all, but the same thing is true of Dirty Harry when Andy Robinson runs Clint Eastwood around San Francisco. It's like, this is physically impossible. But, you know, directors pick things not for logic. They pick them for emotional impact, right?
I never
That's
thought
great.
of
I
that.
think we have a question
So
from
funny.
Danielle.
Well, I think there was a second part to
Oh
the
yeah,
question
sorry.
that-
Sorry for go for that.
That's okay. So the thing that always impresses me about Jacqueline Bisset, I'm going to talk about her as if she's not right here, is just how much intelligence she brings to every single role that she does. You know, this role in Bullitt is essentially the love interest. As Jacqueline said before, she is humanizing the role of Bullitt. It's adding another dimension to him, but she brought so much complexity to what I imagine was quite simple on the page. When we first see her, you know, she's talking about the velocity of a 5-inch pipe, and she's got the clipboard, and you just completely believe her as someone who would be that into modern art and to be talking about those kind of physics. You know, you just absolutely believe her. I think also the scene where she confronts Bullitt about him not seemingly being affected by anything, and the scene where she sees the strangled body on the ground, she just really elevates every scene that she's in, because she brings just much more depth. You want to know more about her character, and that's the only thing that's missing from Bullitt, is just being able to learn more about this woman and what she was like when he's not around.
Thank you so much.
No worries. I totally believe
Thank
it.
you so much. Thank you.
That's great. Okay, Danielle.
All right. My question is for Eddie and Alicia, and a quick note on driving directions. Stripes and When Harry Met Sally are two that come to mind over here.
Yeah, When Harry Met Sally, absolutely.
But my question is, with regards to the programming lineup between TCM and the HBO Max curation, what are the 3 films that you would recommend someone watch if they have no familiarity with classic films?
Wow.
Well, one thing that I'm really looking forward to on TCM that I think is going to be really fun is the SF Sketchfest table read they're doing of Plan 9 from Outer Space, the Ed Wood film. And I think it's going to be really funny to see these comedians take on this pretty weak script. I think that's going to be funny, and then to watch the film straight afterwards will be a little treat. As to HBO Max, it's so exciting that you can have all these extra features, so you get to delve into the movie even further, to watch the interview, you know, with Jacqueline and Eddie after you see Bullitt or before you see Bullitt. But I would say there's a lot of great films there directed by women, so I would encourage Cleo from 5 to 7, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, by Agnes Varda, and Daughters of the Dust by Julie Dash, which is just so lyrical and beautiful to watch. So you'll get to really experience many more films on HBO Max, and I love that we have that partnership.
Well, I agree with Alicia. I mean, it really is a matter of what is your taste, because there's so much to choose from in these lineups that trying to direct someone to one particular film. And, you know, you did say if they haven't seen classic film, and when these things are programmed, it's so essential for the programmers like Charlie Tabish to realize this is the first time somebody's going to be seeing these movies. And a lot of us who are movie geeks, you know, and cinephiles, it's like, oh, the Maltese Falcon again. but you have to realize it's the first time somebody, it's always someone's first time to see a film like that. Or the Powell and Pressburger movies that are being shown. It's like, if you haven't seen those movies, you cannot miss them. And after we show Bullitt, I'm going to be showing this film, They Won't Believe Me, which from 1947, which was produced by the great Joan Harrison. It's, in my estimation, her masterpiece. She was Alfred Hitchcock's protege. And this is the first time it's been shown in its complete, uncut, fully restored version. So that is the film that I am really touting, because when it was reissued in the 1950s as a B feature, 15 minutes were cut out of the movie. And so those 15 minutes have been restored. And this is the first time it's ever been shown at its proper length on TCM.
That's great. Okay, Jim, you've got one last question for us in this room.
Yeah. First of all, just a side note, Bill Hickman died in 1986. So it's been a while. Question for Alicia and Eddie. Aside from Bullitt, which we know Jacqueline, I mean, obviously it's such a prominent role. What other movies that Jacqueline was in would you recommend someone who hasn't seen her in any other stuff? What sort of films would you go, like maybe even some, go ahead, Eddie.
We're both going to say the same thing.
I know, we're both going to say the same thing, because this is why now I'm really going to embarrass Jacqueline, because Jacqueline actually plays a very important role in my life as a devotee of cinema, because on the same day, I think I was 15 years old, on the same day in San Francisco, I saw Francois Truffaut's Day for Night, and I was so high from this movie because it truly ignited my passion for cinema. And it was the first time I really understood everything that went on behind the camera. And it's such a lovely film. And Jacqueline is so fabulous in this movie. She is just the light at the center of this film. And then I couldn't go home because I was so excited. And I walked up the street. I saw Day for Night at the Larkin Theater, and I walked up the street to the Music Hall Theater, and I saw the first run of Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets. It had just opened. And that 1-2 punch just turned my head around. And I was a movie fan forevermore. And yes, I did have a poster of Jacqueline on my wall at home. And it was not the poster from The Deep.
No, I hope not.
No, it was not the poster from The Deep.
Yeah, I was going to say Day for Night. I love Jacqueline's character in that movie. And for anyone who loves films, it's so much fun to see the making of a movie. I think Jacqueline really got to show everything that she could do as an actress, and she brings so many layers to that performance. Also a great cat cameo in that movie.
Very sweet cat cameo, yeah.
Yeah.
Mine was Great Chefs of Europe when I was 12. I saw it 50 times. I have it on 16 millimeter film, but that's just one of my all-time favorites.
Oh, it's great.
That's great. Any quick 2-second questions? We've got 20 seconds. Go for it. Go wild.
Ed, I love Trouble premiering. I'm excited. I've never seen it. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, that was a surprise. I'm very happy about that. Yeah.
That's great. Well, we're leaving in 4 seconds. Room 4, you were fantastic. You were very organized.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, Eddie, and Alicia.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Nice to see you.